Hi, I am Andrea. I'm the head of customer success at ProdPad. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. I see quite a bit of people logging in. This is super exciting. I'm here with our CEO, Janna Bastow. And today, we are going to be talking to you about Trello. Those are our faces again. So we'll be going over why product managers need a tool of their own, how to connect to development tools such as Trello, and most importantly, how to use both pieces of the puzzle together. We're also going to be taking a look at how to set up the Trello integration. We'll be going over some best practices, and of course, we're going to take time to answer your questions. Before we get started, some basic housekeeping. As always, feel free to drop your questions in the questions tab. I believe it's that way for you guys, to the right. We will be stopping throughout the webinar and taking in your questions, just to make this a little bit more engaging. And we will also be running some polls on the polls tab, so you can answer those as we go. And if you want to tweet at us, you can tweet at us at ProdPad. With all that said, Jana, on to you.
Hey there, thanks so much for the intro. Can everybody see and hear me? Are we good to go here? Okay, good stuff. All right, so we get a lot of people asking us about how to use Trello alongside ProdPad, so we're going to be talking through that. So I'm going to be walking you through a really super sleek process of using ProdPad and Trello together. We're going to look at how to split your backlog, so you've got approved and ready to go specs on one side, and your more fuzzy backlog of unknowns on the other. We're going to be looking at how to use your roadmap and your backlog together to prioritize in line with your strategic goals. And then we're going to look at how you can capture the details for each spec and push them over to Trello for delivery. And then finally, we're going to look at how you can use the new workflow view to get a window into progress, into what's going on in development. Are we ready to go? All right, so if you're using Trello already, you might be asking, Trello versus ProdPad, what's the difference? Why do I need them both? And it's a really good question, and it's one that we can answer because we actually use ProdPad and Trello together ourselves to build our own products. And it's not a matter of one versus the other. They each solve completely different problems. ProdPad helps you figure out your product strategy, the what to build and why, while Trello takes over to help your engineering team build it well, the execution. The product roadmap is a strategic document. It's like a prototype for your strategy and helps communicate where you are now and where your product vision is taking you in the future. Whereas the release plan is a completely different document, focused completely on the delivery side. So a good development process should actually focus on the execution side. It should give your developers a level of autonomy that they should crave, but it shouldn't overwhelm them with this really untidy backlog of half-formed ideas and not yet approved specs. So this is where Trello excels. Almost every Trello development board has some variation of the doing, testing, and done columns. Now, your own process might have a bunch of other steps between these, but that's okay. As long as you're watching the work in progress, which is the number of cards in each column at any point in time, work's going to progress pretty smoothly. This visual Kanban view gives a really nice overview. It helps you see where things are getting stuck. But what about that ever-growing list of things piling up in that column you call to do? You know, left unattended, it's going to grow and grow, and it just makes it harder to make informed decisions about theories. It also completely muddies up your developers' ability to just see what they're supposed to be working on next. And I mean, here we've seen a bunch of, I guess you could say, creative ways of getting to keep it from getting too unwieldy, you know, whether it's a complicated tagging system or extra columns. But the reality is that your product backlog is more than just an ordered list of cards. If you want to make sure that you're building the right things, you need a better space to manage your product backlog. So here's where a lot of people get confused, because backlog is a pretty broad term. So let's differentiate. We've got our development backlog, which is the stack of specs that are ready and approved for development and are just waiting for someone to start building. This backlog should be relatively short and tidy and will live in a Trello board column called maybe ready for dev or to do. But its input will be prioritized. It should be ready to go specs from your roadmap and pushed directly over from ProdPad. It's a relatively short and manageable list of tickets. Your developers can pick from this list and know that they're working on more or less the right thing and in the right order. And they should have enough information that they can just crack on with it. The product backlog is something different. You might know it as the opportunity backlog, as Marty Kagan calls it. The list of all the things you could do to build the right product. Naturally, you'll never complete everything on this list, but it's going to be chock full of insights and opportunities for product improvements and innovations. So the inputs for the product backlog are pretty far-reaching, from customer requests to suggestions that you're hearing from the team to insights from experiments and prototypes and more. This backlog is the one that lives in ProdPad, and it's what it should be doing. What you're using it for is to sort through, to spec, and sign off on with the product team using the backlog tools and the roadmap, as I'll show you. So in the ProdPad backlog, we call these ideas. Now, before we dive into using the product backlog tools and the roadmap to make strategic decisions about what's going into your priorities, does anyone have any questions about the process of splitting up your backlog into these two sections, the stuff ready for dev and the stuff that's not?
I do actually see a couple of questions here. The first one being, how do I actually split my backlog if it's all in one tool?
That's a really good question, and we end up talking to a lot of people who are in that situation where they've got a backlog. And this could be something that lives in a spreadsheet, a big list of things to do. It might be something that lives in your Trello to-do list. A lot of people have that one column that I was talking about, or it might live elsewhere. What we generally recommend doing is using this rule of thumb. It should be approved, ready to go, and have enough details so that a developer can pick it up and start working on it. If it's not one of these things, then take it out of your Trello backlog. Take it out of the backlog that you have. The ones that are ready to go, they go into your Trello columns. That should be relatively short. The rest of it, if you can export it into something like a CSV or an Excel spreadsheet, you can then import that into ProdPad. So you're not losing any of that work. You're just moving it from one place to the next.
We have a really interesting question here that's got quite a few upvotes. I'm really from Matt. Hey, Matt. Matt is asking, where do you put your faults? What about your technical debt? Would that go in Trello or ProdPad so that you can prioritize?
Super good question. I hear this a lot, like where do bugs go? Generally speaking, you shouldn't be tracking bugs in something like ProdPad. Bugs are basically tasks to be done. A bug should be given steps to replicate and clear indication as to what's happening and where. And it's one of these things that the developer should just be able to pick up and work on. Now, once it's in your Trello backlog, it's up to you how you break that out. I've seen some teams do bug crush weeks where they'll spend a week a month just focusing on bugs. Sometimes they'll fit in a certain number of story points per sprint to do bugs and work on tech debt and other faults. And it's not just bugs. There might also be other DevOps tasks, things that need to happen on the technical side that don't actually affect the product. They don't need that oversight from the product managers. It's really something that the developers and the lead dev will be sorting out among them, amongst the other cards that they're doing. So a Trello board should be a list of tasks, including stories to be built, as in new features that need to go in, as well as bugs and faults and DevOps tasks and that sort of thing.
This next question is absolutely not off topic, so don't worry about that. This is actually what we're here to talk about. And this might actually be a really good intro to the next section, Jana, which is what are the benefits of using a Trello ProdPad combo versus managing everything in a dev tool like Jira or Trello?
Good question. To be honest, something like Jira is much more akin to something like Trello in that it's a great tool for managing the individual tasks, and it's about figuring build it and how and when that's going to come out. Jira is equally not a great tool to manage that big fuzzy backlog of ideas. In Jira, you might have more than that one column stacked up and down with your priorities, but it's also not a place that most of your team is willing to go to add ideas. It's also, it's quite difficult to use for somebody who's not technically focused. And it often forces you to think about things in terms of features to be done. And you know what? We all know that building a whole bunch of features doesn't make a good product. So pulling them out and putting them somewhere like ProdPad, which is not just a backlog tool, it also helps you connect it to the company goals and the strategic objectives that you have, so that what you're building isn't just what's next in the Jira list or in the Trello list, it's what makes sense the most for the business. All right, so let's move on because to the next segment. All right, so you've got a nice tidy Trello backlog. You've split up your Trello backlog. You've used the import, and now you have a whole bunch of actionable tickets in Trello, and the rest are in ProdPad. But of course, as I was saying, product management is much more than just delivery of features. How do you track customer problems? How do you manage the influx of input and opinions coming in from across your organization? How do you handle business and revenue objectives that influence your priorities? So ProdPad picks up where Trello leaves off here, managing that complex and tangled all the interests of your customers and stakeholders while keeping you on track to meet your product vision. And that's a really important piece. So what ProdPad is doing here is giving you the tools to answer questions about the future of your business. This is a strategic piece. Questions like, what problems do we need to solve? What should we work on next to move this particular metric? What's our long-term strategy? ProdPad helps you identify where to take your product next, whereas Trello helps teams execute the plan. Keeping these functions separate means that you're going to be better at both. So as I said, follow this rule of thumb. Every card in Trello should be actionable and approved, ready for developer to pick up and move into their doing pile. As for everything else that's still being spec'd, validated, and approved, keep that separate. You need to size your backlog up in a variety of different ways in order to make informed decisions about what's going to be happening next. So let's look at how we do that. The ideas list in ProdPad forms your product backlog. You can view this list in a standard list view, which is great for sorting and quick triaging. It'll help you answer questions like, which ideas are most wanted by our customers, or which suggestions are going to have the biggest impact on our revenue? But let me show you my favorite way to look at the backlog. For a more holistic view, take a step back and look at the priority chart view of your roadmap, which you get by clicking on chart at the top there. And that takes you to a view similar to this, where each of the dots in this chart represent an idea in your backlog. The size of the dots indicates how detailed or well spec'd out each idea is. It's like being able to see at a glance whether something is a scribbled out idea on a post-it note or a thick folder of research supporting the idea and why it should exist. The color of the dots indicates how fresh it is. The bright pink ones were updated quite recently, whereas over time they fade away to purple and finally to gray. It's a great way to see at a glance as to whether you've got an idea that might be falling between the cracks and needs your attention. And the ideas are then grouped together by impact and effort. So the high impact, low effort ideas appear up here as quick wins. And in the other quadrant in the time sinks, you've got your high effort, low impact ideas. And so this is all based on data that you're collecting for each product idea. So you can query your own backlog in a bunch of different ways and filter down to answer questions like, what are the product ideas submitted around a particular area, whether that's your onboarding or checkout process or analytics, or which ideas haven't been touched in a little while and need more attention, or which ideas have your high value customers asked for, which ones are going to be most suitable for them. And you can combine them to give you a lot of control. For example, you might want to find the ideas that are most popular with customers or get you revenue and are for the right type of user, right type of persona, and find that narrow list so that you know where to focus your attention. So that ability to nail down problem areas quickly and then identify matching ideas from your backlog is pretty essential to figuring out what needs to be prioritized on the roadmap. So you've got this powerful way to dig through your roadmap, but the job of the product manager does not stop there. Your prioritization can't just be based on what your customers want the most or what's going to be a quick win. We know that a big pile of features doesn't make a good product. In fact, it often leads to the opposite. You need to combine your powerful backlog with a roadmap, which will help outline the steps you're taking to meet your product vision. A good product roadmap will allow you to stack up your priorities specifically to hit your company objectives without bogging you down with too many onerous details. So let me show you how that works. This is a lean product roadmap. The roadmap is meant to tell you the bigger story of your product strategy. Each card in your roadmap represents a problem to be solved, and each one will be connected to your company objectives. Now, you might call these KPIs or OKRs or simply objectives. This is the selection that we use because we're a SaaS product, but your own company objectives might differ. And each of the cards will sit in one of these three columns, or what we might call time horizons. And your roadmap's going to shift in granularity and scope as it goes further into the future. Cards in the current column tend to be much more granular, whereas cards in the future are much more about the big problems you're going to solve that are part of your story of how you're going to hit your product vision. In each of these columns, you'll have roadmap cards, and each of the cards on your roadmap represent these high-level initiatives or projects. These are at a higher level than the Trello cards in your development board. So the ones in your Trello cards represent tasks or individual features or stories. Your roadmap cards in ProdPad actually contain links to those Trello cards encapsulated within them. So think of these cards as the big problems to be solved or the areas of focus. They might have a number of different linked ideas presenting different features, or I like to think of them as experiments that will be created to try to solve the problem. And since the development process of coding, testing, and releasing is actually just a small part of the overall product development flow, most of what's happening in your Trello board will be represented by cards in your current column. The near term and future will contain cards that represent initiatives further away on the horizon that'll be validated and broken down into more detail later. And in ProdPad, we give a sequence you might find handy. It's called the completed column that represent project released. Now, Trello board, these have been archived. They've been put into the done pile and archived away, so your dev team can focus on their current and upcoming work. But we all know that just because a feature's been released doesn't necessarily mean it's proven to solve the problem. So the completed column gives you a space to track these projects and validate whether they worked or not. You can then capture those findings directly in the completed column in your roadmap and then look back on that and find out what big problems you solved and what actually happened out of those experiments and all those things you tried over the last few releases or years even.
Hey guys, so we're back with questions. One question I have here is opening your product backlog to the whole team may result in an unmanageable backlog. And some people might be frustrated with the amount of ideas and suggestions. How does ProdPad help with that? And as I'm saying that, Jana has been disconnected. But we're working on getting her back on. I feel like her Wi-Fi may have dropped. Can you guys still hear me? Are we all okay on my end? I do apologize for the technical issues. If you can still hear me, if you could just give me a yes. Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. So while we work on getting Jana back, I'm going to try to tackle that question if I can. We actually have something called the Unsorted tab. And what the Unsorted tab does is it actually acts like a silo before things get to your backlog. And it gives you an opportunity to actually kind of validate those issues. And Jana is back. Do you want to talk about the Unsorted pile?
Can you guys hear me now? Okay, good. And I think I might have lost my screen share, so I'm just going to try to share that as well. Make sure we're right back on track. My screen now. And thanks for your patience with all the technical issues. I actually wasn't really paying attention to the question because I was so busy getting back online, but I understand there's something about the unsorted pile.
The question was, if you have so many ideas coming through, is that going to get unmanageable, and how does ProdPad help with that? So I was suggesting using the Unsorted tab as a silo before things make it into your backlog, and combining that with a couple of workflow statuses to kind of let your team know what your process actually looks like, what it takes for an idea to actually make it into the backlog. And we're also very big on asking the question, what problem are you trying to solve? So instead of your team just randomly popping in ideas saying, I'd like the button to be blue, you actually get to understand why the button should be blue, which I think is part of where those issues come from. People getting frustrated is they don't provide the product manager with enough information from the.
Okay, cool. So I think you actually covered some of it. You mentioned so one of the things that we do in ProdPad is that we make it really easy for everyone to add their ideas to ProdPad, because we don't want people to get frustrated and then not tell you good ideas that they have. So people can email them in, they can use a Chrome extension, they can use Slack, they've got tons of ways of putting it in there. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the product people have a lot of tools to keep on top of their backlog. So one of these that I haven't actually shown today, I don't have a picture of it, but it's called the Unsorted pile. And it's kind of like an email inbox in that it allows you to capture those ideas before they actually go into your main backlog. So you can go through and tag them and sort them and add some basic metadata to it. In general, we generally recommend that you have at least a couple tags, write a basic business case, add some basic details to each idea, and then put it into the backlog where it's ready to be prioritized amongst everything else. We also have what we call triage mode, where, remember I was telling you about all those different sets of filters. You could say something like, find me all the ideas that are quick wins, revenue generating for this type of persona, and show me the ones that haven't been touched in a long time. And it'll give you the list of those 10 ideas. And then you just click into that list and you can work through that list really, really quickly. It's called triage mode. So that's something else that we have to just help product people to keep on top.
My understanding is that roadmap cards should map pretty closely to your objectives or OKRs. How does that fit with validating, quote unquote, a roadmap card?
That's a perfect question. So basically, let me see if I can go back in this slide here. Each of these cards right here, you're right, should be mapped to some objective, right? There's no point in saying we want to build this feature, because you need to be able to say we want to build this feature in order to do this, and that this is your objective. That way, when you've actually built it and you've moved it into your completed column, you can actually check as to whether it worked. You know, it's one thing to say, yes, we built that feature, but it's something else altogether saying, well, we built that feature, and as we expected, it increased revenue or decreased churn or did whatever for the actual company. So it's really important to tie these things back to the actual reasons, the objectives behind it, and ProdPad allows you to do that. So each of these cards would have data on it that would show you the objective for it. Let me see if I can find that there. There you go. So here's an example of objectives on a roadmap.
We have so many questions. I don't even know which one to pick next. You guys are super engaged. I'm just going to pick a random one because there's so many. Here's a really good one from Sam. And after this, we'll move on to the next one because I totally know you guys have a lot of questions, but we can't keep you here forever, unfortunately. So the question is, do you recommend tracking business objectives like reducing churn over customer objectives, like, let's say, easier to collaborate?
That's a really deep question. And to be honest, a lot of that comes down to what your actual company objectives are. Both are valid. The important thing is that you actually have something that you can measure. So I would actually argue that reducing churn, tracking that number, is easier to track than easier to collaborate. So you might want to expand that easier to collaborate and tie that back to something that you can actually measure. Now, there might be ways that you measure that. There's lots of ways to get both quantitative and qualitative. Many are perfectly valid. You know, just like with anything, it sort of depends on what it is you're trying to get out of it. So make sure that when you're setting your objectives, there are things that you can say, did we improve this? I think that's the key point. Okay, so we are, you've got an idea in your ProdPad backlog, you've spec'd it out, you've added it to the roadmap, you've got all your other priorities ready to go, and it's now ready for development. Great job. So this next part is actually really easy. Each idea in ProdPad is going to have a bunch of handy fields like a business case or a description for the feature. Break it down into user stories. You can add functional specs, find more. You can link it to the customers and what they specifically asked for when they requested the feature. So you'll have all these features, all these fields in ProdPad, and once you set up the integration with Trello, you simply click this one button that says push to Trello. The idea in ProdPad will become a card in Trello and will sit in a column such as ready for dev. So now it's a approved, ready to go ticket that lives in your dev backlog, ready for your developers to pick it up, build it out, and deliver it. Now, I'm not going to go into huge detail here, but the Trello integration with ProdPad is quite configurable. So you can actually choose which fields get carried over and where they go into that card and which columns are synced. So you can, an idea is pushed to Trello, does it go in the first column or does it go into the second column? But usually it goes into the column that's, you know, the ready to dev pile, the pile that developers have to pick from when they're setting up the next work to be done. So yeah, there we go. So once everything's been sent to Trello, you want to keep an eye on progress. So remember that your product in your team is made up of more than just your product. You have marketing, customer support, sales, and tons of others who are responsible for supporting the business. Now, each team has a stake in the product. They submit ideas, they hear complaints and suggestions directly from the customers. They've got all these insights, and they want to know what's going on within the product and the development teams. But for someone who's not in engineering, the Trello dev board can be pretty confusing and overly complicated. After all, you know, you might just have a simple doing, testing, done set of columns, but more often than not, we're seeing different steps in between. And it's important for the developers to be able to track these individual steps, but they don't actually impact the rest of the business. After all, your salesperson doesn't care that, you know, a particular feature was handed off from dev 1 to dev 2. They just want to know when this thing was released. So by having your wider team add your needs to ProdPad, they can focus on what's important. They can explain the problem. They can back it up with customer feedback and any other screenshots and data. It gives a bigger picture. But then as the Trello card moves through the process, the status actually reflects back directly into ProdPad. And this is visible in the idea. It's visible on the roadmap. And it's also visible in this unique ProdPad workflow view that you can see here. So in this view, everyone can look up the status of any ideas that they care about, including the ones that are already in Trello. So you map the status of your ideas from ProdPad, from Trello back to the ideas in ProdPad, and it basically creates this window. It allows you to create this simplified view of the development process, fit for communicating with the rest of the team. Okay. You guys are incredibly patient. Thank you so much for putting up with our Wi-Fi issues. The good news is you've basically seen most of what we were going to show you today. So, you know, here's why ProdPad and Trello are a real dream team. Together, you're able to seamlessly sync your product backlog, now enriched with all those data points to make the right decisions, and keep an eye on how the project progresses through development. Your developers are going to regain some sanity with this tidier board in Trello, and you have tighter control of and visibility into what's being built for the right reasons. So with our Trello integration, all you have to do is push the specs you've approved to development, and the integration syncs it back, as I showed you with the workflow. Now, at this point in time, I'm happy to take more questions because we've basically seen all of this. We've shown you how to split your backlog. We've shown you how to prioritize using your roadmap and the backlog tools. We've talked about how to push things to Trello, and we've talked about how things from Trello sync back to yourself. So there's a lot more going on in ProdPad besides. I sort of alluded to things like the customer feedback section where you can capture what your customers are saying and linking to that. I showed you the priority charts. There's a lot of things around, pulling in your team and making sure that they can communicate and have conversations around different ideas and feedback in the roadmaps. We've got options to publish your roadmap and make it public, or create customer feedback sections where people can pull in their feedback. So we'll be happy to show you more of this stuff. In the meantime, if Wi-Fi willing, we'll happily take some more questions and talk you through, because we've got another 10 minutes or so.
We do have a question here. Did you mute yourself? There we go. It has a full 15 votes, and Bernie has pinged me twice. So Bernie, we're going to take your question now. Bernie is a ProdPad user, and everything works great. I'm happy to hear that, by the way. But he has a challenge, which is when changes to the idea start coming up as a result of development. Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. So it's not uncommon for an idea to be pushed to Trello, and as the developers are working on it in their sprint, they'll still have questions. Typically speaking, the idea should now be broken down to something small and sizable and estimatable. That is something that ideally they'll be able to ask you, the product manager, directly, get the additional details directly in Trello, and continue forward with building that. So the idea is that you're doing the work up front to make sure that they've got enough to build this one small piece, and then can crack on with that, and you can jump in and help them out. Sometimes they'll get partway through a sprint and realize that it was a bad idea, or it doesn't have enough specs, or it doesn't have enough detail, and that's normal too. That happens to the best of us, at which point you've got the option of either pausing that one and going back to work on the idea back in ProdPad and redefine it and make sure that it is still a priority based on what you now know, based on what the developers told you. And if so, you can press a button and send it to Trello again for the developers to pick up, perhaps next sprint or next time they get a chance to pick up something. So it's not uncommon for things to stop. There is always going to be a fuzzy line between product and development, but having these two tools allows you to communicate quite easily between them while making sure that what goes into Trello is more actionable than what typically exists in there.
The next question is actually a problem we used to have, the question is from Aaron, who was asking, one of the challenges we've had with Trello is that the idea card is often large and the dev team breaks it down into smaller cards. Unfortunately, these issues are then not connected back to the big idea. How can we handle this case?
That's a really good one as well. Thanks, Aaron. So the idea card usually starts quite large, but what we have within ProdPad is the ability to break those down into individual user stories. So you can actually be doing some of that planning in ProdPad where you're breaking it down into smaller pieces that can be estimated. Ideally, if you're following, basic sprint rules, you shouldn't be pushing in things that are expected to be larger than this. So you should be talking about things that are a matter of hours or at most days to build. If you find an idea is too large and you're not able to tackle it, maybe it actually represents a larger a larger release and needs to be represented by smaller individual user stories. The good thing about user stories in ProdPad is that they're actually connected to ideas, and that you can take that idea and push the whole thing and the user stories over, or you can actually take individual user stories. So let's say you've got 20 user stories as part of one idea. You can take 5 of those and push those to the Trello board today, have them work on those, and then once they're validated and done, you can push the next 5 or the next 10 or whatever else you need to do. So those user stories can be used to break things up into smaller pieces and continue the flow over to Trello. So you've got that nice, easy, small task list of things for the developers to tackle for the sprint.
We've got a question, which I don't know if I'm being honest, I have no idea how to answer this, but I'm going to let the pro answer it, which is, Can you please talk about deving an overarching VOC framework using ProdPad?
Okay, so the question was could you please talk about developing an overarching voice of customer framework using ProdPad? I believe this is what they're saying, if I've translated this correctly. So I think the nearest thing to a voice of customer framework is very much around the concept of this customer feedback. So the thing is that you don't want to just build ideas that people come up with. You often want to tie this back to what the customers have asked for. So within ProdPad, we have an entire section called customer feedback, where you can capture what individual users asked for. So maybe you were talking to Malcolm on the phone and he gave you some feedback and he suggested you build X, right? He asked for a particular feature. Well, you can then take that piece of feedback and you can link that to an idea in your backlog. And once you've done that, you can then look at that idea and find out who else asked for that. And what it allows you to do is two things. One is understand the context of what somebody asked for, like why they asked for something. A common one might be that you have some people asking you for color-coded tags and other people asking for hierarchy in tags, at which point you might actually solve the problem with one particular trying to do is organize their tags better. So the other thing that it does is allows you to, so what I was saying with that is that the solution that you come up with sometimes doesn't match exactly what they asked for, but as long as you understand that context, you can make sure that you're solving the underlying problem that customer came to you with. So you're logging that in ProdPad, which then allows you to close the loop. And this is a trick that a lot of teams miss, which is once you've actually built something, you might build something because a lot of people asked for it, but in reality, can you tie it back to who asked for it and when and why and what they said? Well, with ProdPad, it allows you to tie back and say, well, we've built this feature, it's been released, we can see that it's done in Trello and it's good to go. That's all synced back to ProdPad. So let's contact these 10 users and let them know, hey, remember that time you asked for this thing? We've now built it. Here's how to gain access to it or upgrade to see it or join our beta group or whatever it is they need to do as their next action if they want to see this new feature you built for them. I hope that helps answer your question. Thanks very much for that one.
I would just add to that, that is actually my back to people, and those of you that are here that are ProdPad users probably have received an email from me saying, thank you so much for, for making a difference in the product. I don't think we have an actual slide showing the customer desire, do we?
We don't, but based on the questions that we're having here, we're going to send an email following up with the recording of this webinar anyways, and we'll include things like the step-by-step with pictures, guide to setting up the Trello integration, as well as some other key things around the customer feedback, some of this more detailed specking stuff that we alluded to. Unfortunately, we can't go through the whole thing today, but there's a lot more under there, and we'd be happy to chat to you and make sure that you've got all the information you need to make the most out of it.
Cool. If you guys have any, whoops, we're getting some feedback on your end. There we go. No worries. Jana's face is gone, but no worries. She's sitting right across from me, and she's waving hello. But if you guys have any final questions, ask them now. Will I be sending around the Q&As as text too? We can definitely look into that. If you have any specific questions, you can drop us a line at hello@prodpad.com or send us a tweet at prodpad.com. Is that green wall real or alive? It is not real. It seems impossible to keep alive. No, it's not real. It does seem impossible to keep alive. I would agree. I apologize. I was answering and I was muted. So no, it's not. They're all fake plants. How do you prioritize ideas in ProdPad? Can you apply multiple strategies? That is an awesome question. That
Yes, and you absolutely should. One thing that we've learned is that there is no silver bullet to prioritization, right? We could come up with the most complex algorithm that measures out who's asking for what and, what objectives it touches and, applies some machine learning and AI and all this kind of stuff. And it'll come up with this list of here's the top 10 things for you to go work on. And realistically, you're going to go work on number 12 because you know that that particular customer is going to leave if you don't, or the conference is coming up next month, or whatever else. The product manager's job is still to measure out and figure out all the different inputs and figure out what to build next. There is no one algorithm or way to stack your ideas. So what we're doing with the things like the priority charts and the ways that you can filter and view your ideas is actually giving you lots of different ways to cut up the information that's in your backlog and compare that to what's going on in your product backlog, so you can, what's going on in your product roadmap, so that you can connect those ideas to the roadmap. Product management is still more of an art than a science, and it's why they need people like us to ask the right questions and figure out the right sort of things so that we can build the best stuff.
Here, how do you understand when one or more customer sends feedback, and how do you decide which ones should become ideas, and then eventually how do you push those to Trello, and when do you push those to Trello?
So the customer feedback section in ProdPad has just about as many controls with the tagging and the sorting and the filtering as the ideas section itself. So you can actually use that to start figuring out where there's groupings. So you might have a bunch of customers asking about integration, so you can start grouping those together. And as you do so, it then increments the number of people who've asked for a particular idea in the backlog, so you can then see these are ideas that are useful for these types of users and it's wanted the most by those types of users. For example, that would be a simple query you could run. But you could also do the same thing within the feedback. You could say, show me the stuff show me the requests from high value customers, or show me the requests from large enterprises as opposed to small businesses. What you ask and what you do with that information depends hugely on what your objectives are and what it is you're trying to do. But we give you all those tools to help figure out how to make sense of all the feedback and all the ideas in your backlog.
I thought we didn't have questions, but we do. This is great. Thank you, guys. And there's still so many people here. Can you track history of development so you don't buckle the problem you have already overcome? And how do you understand what lessons you have learned? That is where I would say the completed column comes into play, but I'm going to let Jana.
Yeah, so that's actually the exact purpose of the completed column. Originally when we built this, we didn't have it. And what we found were that people were deleting their cards. So once they'd release something, they'd delete the card from the completed column so the roadmap showed what was coming up. And it's a bad habit we see with a lot of people where once they release something, they'll just close all the tickets in Jira or in Trello and crumple up all the Post-it notes off the wall and start moving on to the next thing. But it doesn't really tell you as to what worked or what didn't work, which is why we created that completed column, so you can actually go back and see. And it's not just for celebrating all your successes, because not everything you build is going to be successful. So it's also a section to capture the information about what didn't work. Why were things held off? Why didn't it actually solve a problem? And what you learned from that. It's a little bit like in math class. You get half the points for showing your work. So product managers shouldn't be just building features and moving on to the next ones. They should be capturing this big list of things that they've tried and what's worked and what's not worked, so that they know and can apply that into prioritization decisions in the future.
Cool. I think we've just about reached our time. Thank you guys so much for being here. I see all of your requests about talking about Jira. Yes, we will be doing a Jira webinar. We're also going to be doing a Slack webinar, which is the next one coming up, and how we set up that community so you guys can do the same. I also saw one about VSTS, great idea. Another one about HubSpot, where we could definitely look into that for sure. So thank you so much for your feedback and for sticking around through all of our issues today. I think Jana may be trying to come back to say goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for all your patience and all the great questions.
Bye, guys. Bye. Thank you.